Some problems are just so massive, they just fade into the background, right? That's the Arctic for you. It's so huge, so impossibly cold, that your brain just assumes that somebody must be watching it, right? For decades, Canada's answer was basically yes, the Americans were watching it. And honestly, that kind of made sense. Why build extensive infrastructure when you've got the world's most powerful military as your neighbor and ally? But 2025 is different, my friends. The first time I saw satellite footage of Russian submarines moving under Arctic ice, submarines that no Western ally could currently track, I didn't feel outrage. I felt this quiet recognition and dread that the old assumptions don't really work anymore. This video is not just about submarines, it's about what sovereignty actually means when the Arctic is opening up, when Russia and China and India are pouring resources into the region, and when your traditional security guarantees start looking less guaranteed. Here's where the story gets actually interesting. Canada just made a move that almost nobody saw coming. They're partnering with Sweden, a country most people barely even think about, to build the most advanced under ice surveillance capability outside the nuclear powers. And it might be the smartest strategic play any middle power has made in years. We're going to walk through why Canada's traditional approach to Arctic security made sense for so long, why this calculus is changing, what Sweden quietly built that changes everything, and why this partnership could reshape how middle powers think about sovereignty in the 21st century. So, if you're Canadian or from any country trying to navigate between great power and competition, real question for you. Does this partnership make you feel more secure, or are you skeptical about moving away from total US reliance? Drop a comment below. I'm really hoping that we can churn up the algo here so that this video gets to the Swedes as well. Quick note about my book. The world is getting louder, my friends. Algorithms fight for your attention. Politicians sell you easy answers. The media rewards outrage over truth. My book Awake teaches you how to think clearly through all of it. Before you buy, read the first chapter completely free. Links below. If it resonates, the full book is there with a 10% subscriber discount. Anyway, let's get back to the video. Let's be honest about history here. Canada's approach to Arctic security wasn't negligence, it was rational cost benefit analysis, right? You've got the world's longest Arctic coastline, an archipelago so vast that proper surveillance would cost tens of billions. And sitting right next door is the United States with the world's most advanced military, nuclear submarines that can operate under ice, and a shared interest in keeping the Arctic secure through NORAD. Now, for decades, the math was simple. Why spend $50 billion building redundant systems when you can invest that money in healthcare, infrastructure, and social programs while your ally handles the heavy lifting? This was not laziness, it was just pragmatism. And for most of the Cold War and post Cold War period, it actually worked perfectly well. But three things changed now. First, the Arctic itself is changing. Sea lanes that were theoretical 20 years ago are now open seasonally. We've got another video on this. Check that one out if you're curious. Russia is now building icebreaker fleets and missile bases. China, thousands of kilometers away from the Arctic territory, now calls itself a near Arctic state and pours money into research stations and shipping infrastructure. Second, great power competition is back. The assumption that the Arctic world remains a peaceful frontier, that's over, my friends. Russia sees it as strategic territory. China sees it as a resource opportunity and shipping shortcut. The old gentlemen's agreements don't hold anymore. And third, and this is the most uncomfortable part, US reliability looks different than it used to. Not because America is abandoning Canada, or maybe, I don't know, but because American politics has become so unpredictable these days. When your security depends on another country's domestic political stability, and that stability starts looking shaky, you need backup plans. So Canada faces a choice: keep relying entirely on US systems or start building sovereign capability. Here's where most people would expect Canada to either do nothing or try to buy American systems, but instead they did something genuinely clever. By the way, if you're finding this useful, do hit subscribe. The house bell is for people who think geopolitics is more interesting than most people realize. Here's the thing that everyone assumes: just buy American technology, right? F-35, satellites, submarines, the US makes the stuff, there's your ally, problem solved, except it's not that simple. American submarines are nuclear-powered leviathans designed for completely different missions. They're built to spend months at sea, hunt enemy boomers in deep water, or lurk under the polar ice cap with strategic missiles. They cost billions each, require massive infrastructure, and come wrapped in so much classified technology that even close allies can't access most of it. Canada has actually asked about buying American submarines. The answer has consistently been some version of no or maybe, but with so many restrictions, you won't actually control them. That's basically useless, right? Then, even if the US said yes, there's a much bigger problem here. Nuclear propulsion is politically toxic in Canada. The public doesn't want it, the regulatory framework doesn't exist for this, and building it would actually take decades, so not really a short term solution. What Canada actually needs quiet diesel electric submarines that can operate under ice for extended periods doesn't actually exist in the American arsenal. From the US perspective, this kind of makes sense, right? They built their submarine force for open ocean warfare and nuclear deterrence. They didn't design it for middle powers trying to patrol shallow Arctic channels and monitor territorial waters. It's not that America doesn't care about Canada. It's just that America built systems for American needs, and those needs are fundamentally different from Canadians. Now, most countries would stop here and either keep begging the US or give up entirely, but Canada was more cunning than that and it began looking elsewhere. And this is where the story gets genuinely interesting. If there is a country that understands quietly competent and hostile maritime environments, it's Sweden. And in 2025, they've done something absolutely remarkable: built the first truly modern, under ice capable, export ready, non nuclear submarine outside the Nuclear Waters Club. This is insane. The Swedish submarine evolved from their A-26 program, but completely reimagined for Arctic conditions, is not just impressive engineering, it actually represents a completely different philosophy as well. Designed for the environment you actually operate in, not the environment that you wish you had. Sweden's been perfecting this approach for decades in the Baltic Sea. The water is shallow, cold, cluttered with shipwrecks and temperature layers, acoustic chaos basically. Swedish engineers built small, resilient vessels that could actually vanish in all that noise. Stirling engines give them weeks of underwater endurance without actually surfacing. Modular designs let them swap sensors, add unmanned systems if they want, and adapt in real time. For Canada's use case, this is almost perfect. Sweden's technology is not restricted by US export controls. It's designed for exactly the kind of environment Canada needs to patrol, and this is critical. It's built for middle powers, not superpowers. The cost structure actually makes sense for Canada. The maintenance requirements are manageable. The technology transfer is actually possible. But here's what makes Sweden's approach so smart: they're not trying to compete with American or Russian nuclear submarines. They're building for a completely different niche: the countries that need capable, sovereign maritime surveillance without the cost and complexity of nuclear systems. And they're not trying to be flashy about it either in classic Swedish fashion. There's just this persistent focus on solving the actual problem rather than building something impressive. In environments where nature punishes arrogance, the kind of humility becomes the smartest possible strategy, don't you think? But this is not just about submarines, my friends. It's about a middle power that figured out how to maintain genuine sovereignty without either joining a superpower's ecosystem or spending itself into bankruptcy. By the way, a tiny thing: I am a computer scientist and I have a PhD in the field, and I'm currently building an AI fluency course. If you're interested in understanding AI without the hype, I've got a very quick survey below. Takes only 2 minutes, and your input will shape what I build. Link is down in the description, but now let's continue. So we talked about a lot of things here, but now watch how these pieces align together. Sweden's NATO membership in 2024 suddenly created opportunities that didn't exist before. The idea of a Canada-Sweden Arctic partnership went from interesting but impractical to strategically obvious almost overnight. There's actual history being made here, my friends. Sweden once offered Canada a custom submarine deal in the 1980s. The deal kind of collapsed for typical procurement reasons: bureaucratic complexity, competing American pressure, political uncertainty, yada yada. But the technical logic was always sound and always kind of present. Both countries have advanced manufacturing, transparent regulatory systems, and similar strategic needs. Now look at the current situation. Sweden and Finland are in NATO. Norway is expanding Arctic infrastructure. The technical capabilities exist. The political alignment is there. And most importantly, both countries share a common challenge: maintaining sovereignty in harsh northern environments while operating between great powers. Joint Atlantic operations became obvious now. Canadian crews training in Baltic conditions that mirror Arctic challenges, technology transfer agreements that respect both countries' autonomy. Under NORAD, both could feed sensor data into a shared northern picture, seeing together what neither could actually see alone. The Arctic isn't a zero-sum game, but it is becoming contested slowly. Every year brings more commercial shipping, more resource exploration, more great power positioning. We've already seen this with the US, China, and Russia as well. The countries that build capability now will have options in the future. The ones that delay will actually find themselves locked out over time. Follow the incentives, my friends. Who benefits from Canada building sovereign Arctic capability? Canada gets security independence. Sweden gets a major export customer and strategic partner. NATO gets better Arctic coverage without the US bearing the entire burden. This is what's called a positive sum outcome. And who loses? Honestly, just the assumption that middle powers must choose between dependence and bankruptcy. That assumption has been wrong for a while, but most countries just kind of haven't figured it out yet. Here's what makes this generally significant in my opinion. Canada is not just solving its own problem, it's actually demonstrating a model for how middle powers can maintain sovereignty in an era of great power competition. The traditional options have always been either become a client state of a larger power or spend massively trying to match superpower capabilities. Both options kind of suck for most countries, right? Canada's approach suggests a third path: identify your actual strategic needs, find partners with complementary capabilities and shared interests, and build sovereign systems that you can actually afford and maintain. This is not just about Arctic surveillance, the story is much deeper. It's about the broader question of how countries maintain independence when the great powers are competing again. Just look at what's happening. Japan and Australia building long range strike capabilities, Poland expanding its military dramatically. Even Denmark, famously cautious Denmark, is increasing defense spending and reducing dependence on US systems. These are not countries turning against America. They're countries building insurance policies against American unpredictability. There is a crucial difference here. In Canada Sweden partnership might be the smartest version of the strategy anyone has attempted. It's not confrontational, it's not isolationist, just pragmatic sovereignty building with a like minded partner. There's something distinctly modern about this approach that traditional defense thinking keeps missing. Sovereignty in 2025 is not about flags or speeches. It's about capability you own, technology you control, and partners you trust. Sweden is not Germany focusing on temperate waters. It's not South Korea with massive industrial scale but limited cold weather experience. It's a northern country building systems for northern environments with no colonial baggage and no imperial strings attached. Canada could build and maintain an Arctic submarine fleet locally, upgraded its technology advances, operated without requiring permission from another capital, partner in environmental monitoring, scientific research, and defense, all while maintaining genuine autonomy. This is what actual sovereignty looks like in the 21st century, my friends. It's not maximum capability across every single domain, 10xing everything like the US does, but sufficient capability in your critical domains, built with partners who respect your independence. In my book Awake, I walk through this pattern as well: how to identify when official narratives are lagging behind reality, and why asking what changed to make this possible now reveals more than just asking who is right here. Because the smartest strategic moves often happen when multiple factors align in ways nobody quite expected. There's this moment when you look at the Arctic from a distance where it seems almost static, frozen, empty, irrelevant to most people's lives. But the closer you get, the more you realize just how much is shifting. Ice is retreating. Shipping routes are opening. Great powers are positioning again. Sweden's submarine technology is technically a marvel of northern engineering. But what it represents for Canada is something even bigger: a path towards genuine sovereignty that doesn't require either dependence or bankruptcy. Earlier, I asked how you read this shift. For me, the interesting thing isn't whether Canada made mistakes before. Every country makes mistakes, every human makes mistakes. But now it's more whether Canada is making smart choices now. And this partnership, well, it kind of looks genuinely smart to me. The future isn't being written in traditional power centers anymore. It's being written in places like the Arctic by countries making choices that were not available a decade ago. And sometimes the smartest play is the one almost nobody saw coming. If this landed, check out these other videos that I've linked here as a natural next step for a deeper dive. The geopolitical map is being redrawn in cold places most people never really think about, and sometimes the most important moves are the quiet ones. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.